All right, welcome in everybody to Browns Film Breakdown. If you're listening to this free version of the show, be sure to give us 5 stars, Spotify, Apple. We love those reviews. We love new ways to find new people. We would really appreciate that. If you're on YouTube, give us that thumbs up and subscribe. If you're finding this for the first time and have not subscribed to the channel, please do that. For the price of a few cups of coffee, you can join Browns Film Breakdown, where we get you access to our subscriber-only chat, breaking news alerts, ad-free full-length podcast, full articles in newsletter form, and, of course, our film breakdowns, which I think we're doing unique in the market, which we're doing today, a little later, surprisingly enough, on Jalen Milroe. We've had plenty of film rooms up on all the free agents that they've acquired. We have Cornelius Lucas up. We have Joe Tryon Shoyinka. And then we're going to have Malik Collins up a little bit later, too. Those are available, again, daily newsletters that arrive to you in the morning. And then our podcast Substack discussion that is going on, which is a really cool thing because we have a founding members channel where you have access to a Slack channel, which is direct access to us for daily conversation around the Browns, which is really cool. And obviously exclusive insider stuff, including free Browns Film Breakdown swag, which is fantastic. So join us if you have not done so. If you're finding us for the first time, there is a link in the description of both this podcast and on YouTube to find the place to go to sign up with us. So we very much appreciate your support and you being here. And I welcome in Scott and I say, what's up, man? How are you? Let's get this thing on the road. We got some big news this morning, but yeah, I think we should hit on that as the start of this thing because let me lay the groundwork here, buddy. So Jason Lloyd puts out this morning a piece of, his side of the story, which I'm not here to really agree or not agree with, sort of the nature of what he's saying the Browns throw money at situations to solve them. Right. That's the whole entire crux here is the Deshaun Watson didn't want to come to Cleveland. They throw money at him to get him to come. Myles Garrett didn't want to stay in Cleveland. They throw money at him. I'm not really here to judge that, but there is inside of this a big cultural quote, which I do think matters. And it matters when you're the alpha in the room. It matters when you're the best player. And it matters when your franchise is perpetually down and needs to be drugged from the bottom and work its way to the top. And I could admit to this being something I view as too old school, but I'm interested in your opinion, Scott, being around this. So I'll read the quote first. He says in his article, which I will link in, again, the description of this podcast, there'll be a hyperlink you can click on inside of both Spotify's and Apple's setup. It's in The Athletic. Says here, it's well known within the Browns that Garrett is frequently late to the facility. He has skipped mandatory team activities on multiple occasions. Veterans typically police the locker room on those types of things and create the culture of accountability. But here it's the best player breaking the rules. Things have to change, is his quote. So again, Scott, I am not here to cast Myles a bad teammate, a bad person, but I do think personally you can probably get by with 90, if you're 90 to 95% of your best players are accountable for everything. I think there's a little wiggle room there. And perhaps when your best, your alpha, I think in this case, which is Myles, is not following and doing what he's supposed to do, you can get by if everyone else is doing that. But I do think the Browns are in this sort of situation without leadership at quarterback and some of the others where this stuff doesn't fly very well. But again, I can be convinced that I am, a little too old school on this sort of thing. But I do think that, again, Jason Lloyd, you might have an opinion on the writer and the way he covers, both his time with the Cavs and now the Browns. He's focusing more on the Browns. You can't run this sort of stuff without talking to people. And I know that he talks to people, and this is not totally secretive around the more people you talk to that this sort of behavior has happened at times. So I would just ask you, Scott, he was drafted in 2017. You've been around. And the question I would have is what's your temperature on reading something like this? Does this check out a little bit? Or has it gotten maybe worse since you've left? Give me your feedback when reading that sort of quote.
Yeah, so, I guess I'll say I don't know how much worse, if any, it's gotten since I've left, for sure. Jason Lloyd said that he's frequently late and his skip mandatory stuff. I know that has happened. I don't know, to my knowledge, if I would have called it frequent, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been frequent. In my experience with him, I remember, I think in 21 or maybe after 2020 or like heading into 21 season, he was described as like the most fine guy when it came to, I guess, like bigger picture team stuff. I say, I guess in like leadership, I guess is the quickest way to say it. I don't think that, at least in my experience, like I don't think it's a surprise. It's surprising to hear that like he wasn't the biggest like fiery leader. Like he comes across that way on like game day, for sure, in my opinion. But like I think that it's not surprising to hear a report like this. And like I agree with what you're saying. Like Jason Lloyd's not gonna throw this out there. Like I think he is like, say what you will about him, but I think he is like one of the more reliable reporters, that can kind of get in-depth stuff with like from legitimate sources and like legitimate background to it. So like I don't think that it would be something just out of nowhere that he throw out there. And yeah, I guess it doesn't surprise me, unfortunately, but like it doesn't, it's not something that like I'm shocked to hear, which kind of sucks because when it's coming from your best player, that's not great. And there's been, who was it? Like, was Malik Jackson was brought in, I think, like in 21 or 21, and he was like, say what you will about him on the field, like he wasn't great as a Brown, like he was past it, past the prime as a player, but like he was the guy. Like if Myles had his personality and like attitude towards being the guy in the room, maybe it could be communicated a little differently than what Malik did, like how Malik did it. But like if Myles had that same or similar kind of mindset, like there'd be no question that like he's doing everything right and like is the guy that everyone follows. And like it's not really his personality in my experience, and like it can be at times, but like I guess just to wrap it up, like this doesn't surprise me, really hearing something like this.
Yeah, I think when you sort of cross compare, what Jadeveon Clowney had to say a while back around like, hey, this is a situation where I feel like this guy is catered to. And, there was a lot of contention around whether that quote was fair. Like, I think at the time, if you recall, Scott, I don't know, maybe you do or don't, but he had said some pretty harsh things about on-field catering, and it felt like off-field catering. And then he kind of claimed that he was taken out of context, in which case Mary Kay and the sports editor, David Campbell at Cleveland.com, had to come out and be like, hey, this is exactly what he said. We just wrote what he said. That whole thing, though, does make you raise an eyebrow a little bit to some of this stuff. And like, I'm going to come to you for an opinion on the same topic. I don't think, like, again, there are examples of the best player in an organization doing this stuff. Now, am I surprised? Because I think Myles is a really sharp individual and a really, cerebral guy. Like I feel like this is the last thing I would expect from him, because I feel like he should know what it takes to win. But I guess it's not always the case. It's not always the case, And so I think, am I being old school about this? Like being concerned, or maybe it's less a concern. Maybe there's ways they can still make it all work. But I just feel like, is your ceiling that high if your alpha is doing this sort of stuff constantly? And again, like there's examples, and there's some people that have thrown some good stuff out about like LT and some guys like, back in the day. And I'm fine with that. I think you could be like, I think Lawrence Taylor's off-field life was a little different in terms of like the stuff that was keeping him away. I guess it's all not black and white here. I get that. I do feel like there's a question for me about, can the Browns ever be a Super Bowl organization if this behavior happens from your best player? And I just have concerns. Maybe again, like if your quarterback's Josh Allen or one of these others, you know, like you can overcome that and it can be just like Myles being Myles thing. But if Myles is your guy, I just worry that like if the temperature setting person of your locker room is like this, where does it go? And obviously, you know, you think too about a guy who kind of was, you know, contentious at fans at times last year, and then obviously went on his parade this offseason too. I guess I'm questioning, is it fair to be concerned? Because I feel like I'm concerned about where this can go if he's like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think you're being old school. Like, you know, I don't think that's. I think if like people took that as the issue, or like that was their argument against like your stance on this, like that. I don't think that like that doesn't consider, to me, that's not like old school. I think that's just like your best players should have leadership qualities. Like that's just kind of that should be an innate thing in like the best player on the team, in my opinion. Like, you know, he doesn't have to be like the alpha main voice leader. Like if he was great, but like he can't be like, so it's funny you bring up Clowney because like great guy to talk to, like very easy to talk to, very, very like positive for the most part. Like, you know, unless like if something was bothering him, you know, it was clear, but like good guy to talk to, easy enough to talk to. Like, I think he would probably admit, but like anyone who's been around him, like he is probably the definition of like a mercenary type player at this stage of his career. Like is going to go whoever's going to pay him a good amount of money. Hopefully for him, it's on a contender, although he was with Carolina, like, but that's more like he's from there. So that's probably played into it. I mean, but he is like, you know, number one overall pick, like Myles was. Defensive end was supposed to be like generational, and you know he in his prime, like he's not a bad player. Did he ever like was he truly worth like the first overall pick? No, probably not, because like he's not a double-digit sack guy every year. But he's like he was an outstanding run defender that was extremely disruptive, and that's like he was like the opposite of what you would kind of think a prototypical first overall pick DN would be, but he was like extremely good at it. By the time he got to us, like, yeah, he's in the mercenary stage of his career. He could still play. And like, if you put him on the opposite side of Myles, like, yeah, he's going to like have decent numbers. Now it's funny you bring him up because it's almost like Myles has a little bit of that mentality to him without like fully going there. You know, it like just the sense of like, okay, he kind of like Clowney comes in, he's going to be there for a year, maybe two, and he's going to play well. He's probably going to have like 2 to 4 games a year where like he has to sit out for some kind of soft tissue thing, but like maybe he's just not feeling it that day, whatever it is. But like, it's almost like Myles this makes it seem, and like kind of just going off of my experience with him, it's like he's getting into that mindset maybe a little bit, but like not fully, because he still is like a leader, but like clearly, like if this is true, he's not as good of a leader as he probably should be given his status on the team. And like Myles is obviously a much better player than Clowney is, or was really much more effective, but like this makes me feel like there's a similar mindset between the two guys that like, yeah, that kind of player is not the guy you want as your voice, really.
Yeah, there's give and take with all of this. Certainly, again, understanding that, you know, there are Antonio Browns that find a lot, like that type of player finds a lot of success in the league, but you need a really strong group of leadership in the locker room. Otherwise, I know we can agree on that. I mean, you need almost every other meaningful paid guys who have made the money in your franchise and guys who play the important positions to counteract that, right? Because, you know, it's just Myles being Myles to the extent when you have a really driven franchise quarterback, I think, Scott, or you have, you know, a very boisterous and leadership based like corner. I think Denzel probably does a lot of things really well. He's not a vocal guy, right? Joel Bitonio is probably another leader, also not a heavy vocal type. But like, again, I just feel like you have to have a counterweight to that. And I don't know that they do enough meaningful voices, meaningful counterweights to that I do think are concerning to me. You know, what we know above all else is an NFL players very rarely trash, like almost never trash their teammates, no matter the nature of whatever's going on. They're going to back the NFL brotherhood. So you're like, why is this coming out now? Well, you know, I don't think that there's a deep desire to question teammates and put them on blast in public, but they do hold opinions behind closed doors, and they do make decisions on how they handle things, the professionalism, the preparation for a game, all of those things, being on time for flights and movement things and going out of town, like all that stuff kind of adds up. And why I am concerned, and I'm not dooming the Browns' upcoming season or Myles' long-term stay here, I'm just saying this isn't what you want to hear. It's not, because I don't think it helps. It doesn't help the cause that I think needs as much